While these mystery drones are still being spotted across the United States, and now police in Long Island have been given at least partial clearance to start shooting them down if they go in that area again. Also, Trump has announced his intention to take back the Panama Canal. Let me know your thoughts on this. Good idea, bad idea. He's also talking about buying Greenland and making Canada a state. In fact, he even included it in his Christmas greetings. I'll be talking about these stories and more today, so let's dive into it. First off, folks, on the drones. Limited authority to shoot down the mystery drones was given to police in Long Island, and this is now raising debates in other parts of the United States where the lack of any clear answers on what the heck these are is creating deepening concerns over what exactly we're dealing with and who may be behind it. Now, the debates are also raising new questions over military laws on shooting down the drones and why they're not being used. Now, first off, on the Greenlight, police have gotten the permission to shoot down the mystery drones. At least they do in Long Island in New York. This is not everywhere. New York Post said this, said Nassau County cops have gotten the green light to shoot troublesome drones out of the sky, with officials saying they don't want to wait for something disastrous to happen. And notes the order went out Thursday as county officials unveiled a new state-of-the-art drone command center that can track the mysterious flying crafts from miles away, and they need the feds to sign off on the high-tech tools to intercept and take down the drones. And instead, they're taking matters into their own hands. They said, quote, "We don't want to wait until we have some kind of disastrous event to then say, well, we could have done this and we could have done that." Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman told reporters and then added, quote, "The Nassau County Police Department has the authority and certainly has my approval that if there is a mass gathering anywhere and there is a drone that is a threat to the public at large, they have the authority and the jurisdiction and the right to shoot down that drone." Now look, we're still not being given any answers on what the heck these are. We don't know who's behind them. We're told that they may be manned aircraft, and we're told also they're not from a foreign country. That's about all we know, and again, that's not really telling us much. The police being given permission to shoot them down in Nassau County, though. This could give us some answers on what's going on, especially if they actually down one of them. We can see what it was. We can assume the police will not fire at the drones unless they're sure the bullets are not going to land anywhere that's going to harm somebody. But if they do manage to shoot one down, we could, of course, see what they are and maybe start getting some answers on it. And look, on the other side of this, if drones suddenly stop showing up in Nassau County because they have the green light to shoot them now, we can assume someone has been watching the news and they've decided it's not worth the risk of operating in that area. Now, there are some broader debates on whether policies like this should be expanded to other parts of the United States. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, he said a couple weeks ago that the states should have the power to decide whether or not they want to shoot down the drones. And with this, right, this is likewise also deepened the ongoing debate over whether someone should be allowed to shoot down drones in the first place. Now, one possible effect of this is that somebody may put their gun up in the air, try to shoot a drone, miss, and the bullet can end up hitting an innocent person. That's one of the big concerns in terms of why you don't just fire bullets in the sky, right? Another is that someone may shoot at the drone and it turns out to be just a regular drone or an aircraft that someone happened to be flying. In other words, not an actual mystery drone, but just a real legitimate one. Again, or a small private aircraft, and you could actually injure or kill somebody if you do that. Now, on that note, the FAA actually put a ban on drones in parts of the New Jersey area because the FAA is worried that people might shoot down regular drones that people are flying around. And this could also bring some problems for residents who chose to take matters into their own hands. In fact, earlier this year, a Florida man got 4 years in prison for shooting down a drone. Although the charge he faced was not really shooting down the drone, it's because he had a gun he could not legally own because he was a felon. But there are people who've gone to jail for this. Now look, the growing debate around the drones is also raising some other questions and some interesting stuff as well. One of the big questions is, why does the military not just shoot them down? Why is the military not using technologies to force the drones to land? Again, because they have the technology for this, and that is if they're actually drones. Well, there's some history to this. In fact, if you go back to 2017, the U.S. military was given permission to shoot down drones or to even destroy them if they fly over or near military facilities. Now, there are some limits to this, and some now claim that they cannot shoot the drones down unless they're seen to pose a direct threat. But going by reports that the drones are flying over military bases as we speak, including Camp Pendleton and others, it raises some real questions over why they're not being given the green light to shoot down the mystery drones. Now, look, there was also government approval on this. In fact, if you go back to 2018, government authorities were given some authority to shoot down privately owned drones. This is part of the FAA Reauthorization Act at the time. Meaning, again, the military has permission, the government has permission, or at least they did, and they're choosing to not exercise it. There are also anti-drone technologies that I just mentioned, and these can down the drones without having to shoot them down, meaning there's no safety risk. You just force them to land. This was part of a debate back in 2021. There were private companies wanting to use electronic warfare systems to down these drones. More advanced technologies than what people and police usually have. We have the technology for it. The FAA turned down those requests, and so they're not allowed to test them. And again, there are some concerns over electronic warfare in suburban areas in general, and so maybe that's part of the reason. We don't really know. Now, in more recent reports, with all the issues we're seeing with these drones now, the U.S. military bases have also just chosen to not shoot them down, meaning that even if they have permission for it, they've decided to not shoot them. And it does seem this has been an ongoing issue. These drones, even though they're only now making headlines, this has apparently been going on for years, especially at nuclear facilities and key military bases. It also raises some additional questions over what these drones are, what they're doing, who's behind it, and notably why orders to fire on them or down them are not being used. Again, we're not being given clear answers on this. We don't know what they are. I have my theories on it. We can discuss after this episode during the live Q&A. But again, we're left guessing still. Now look, in other news, package theft is becoming a bigger problem in the United States. The Gothamist said this. It says, package theft has become a ubiquitous fact of life. That according to criminologist Ben Stickle, who studies the phenomena, imagine being a guy who studies package theft, appears to be getting more organized and more bold. And it's that Amazon itself refused to divulge its own figures on how many customers report stolen packages each year, but over the last half-decade, New Yorkers have reported more than 74,000 stolen packages to the NYPD, according to city data. It also shows that the number of calls the police is getting, it's 45% higher during the holiday season than the rest of the year, though overall reports of package theft have declined this year. Again, reported cases, right? However, it notes that number only captures those who've bothered to file complaints. The actual number of pilfered deliveries is likely higher. The total value of stolen packages in New York City, they say, is close to $1 billion. Estimates Safewise, a company that works with Stickle and reviews home security systems. It says the NYPD said it could not provide information on how many people have been arrested and prosecuted for stealing packages, probably because they usually don't arrest them. Now look, folks, I may be going out on a limb here, but do you know how you solve a problem like this? If you have people stealing $1 billion worth of goods a year, how do you do it? Well, I know this may sound crazy, but I would recommend you just start prosecuting the thieves. Lo and behold, there's your solution. You make stealing illegal, and you actually enforce the law. And I would argue the reason you have package theft going unpunished is probably why this is happening. I can say when I lived in Queens, actually, I could not have packages delivered to my house because every single package would be stolen. It is a common, out in the open crime that is just not being punished. they don't enforce the law on it. And the problem you have with companies like Amazon and stuff, of course, is that oftentimes people can file, missing package complaints and they just refund it. Meaning, most people, you don't bother calling the police if somebody steals your package. You go to Amazon, you say my package went missing, and they deliver you a new one. And typically that's created kind of a no victim type of crime in some regards, because Amazon fills that. Technically that oftentimes goes on them or on the company that again provided it in the first place. And again, we'll see if anything changes with this. If you've been watching the news, California started making theft a felony. And the gangs that were going, there's gangs that travel the entire state or come from out of state, and they just rob department stores and so on. People are getting hit with felonies now for doing that because they made crime illegal again. Lo and behold, and go figure, right? Now, look, in other news, Donald Trump just announced a new plan, and he wants to reestablish a key role of the United States in Panama. He's now suggesting the United States should retake control of the Panama Canal. And he first made these comments on Truth Social on Saturday, and then doubled down on it during the speech at Turning Point USA's America Fest just recently. Watch this.
A secure Panama Canal is crucial for U.S. commerce and rapid deployment of the Navy from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific. It's an incredible thing, and drastically cut shipping times down to U.S. ports by days and even weeks. The United States is the #1 user of the Panama Canal, with over 72% of all transits heading to or from U.S. ports. Think of that. So we built it. We're the ones that use it. They gave it away.
Now, Trump also emphasizes the historical significance of the Panama Canal and the amount of money that Americans and, American lives were taken to build it. Watch this.
Considered one of the one of the great wonders of the world. The Panama Canal opened for business 110 years ago and was built at huge cost to the United States, and it really is big when you consider the lives and the treasure, the equivalent of $1.2 trillion today. You don't hear those numbers. 38,000 American men, almost all men. They went there to be construction workers and dig. They were diggers, and they were brave. 38,000 men died. Teddy Roosevelt was president of the United States at the time of its building and understood the strength of naval power and trade. When President Jimmy Carter foolishly gave it away for $1. During his term in office, it was solely for Panama to manage and not for China or any other country to manage. You see what's going on there? China.
Now, he then goes on to note how the Panama Canal system has ripped off the United States by charging us crazy fees to use the thing we built. Watch this.
It was likewise not given for Panama to charge the United States, its Navy, and its corporations doing business within our country exorbitant prices and rates of passage, which they do. They charge us like it's a disgrace. Our Navy and commerce have been treated in a very unfair and injudicious way. The fees being charged by Panama are ridiculous, highly unfair, especially knowing the extraordinary generosity that has been bestowed to Panama, I say very foolishly, by the United States. This complete ripoff of our country will immediately stop. It's going to stop. The United States has a big and vested interest in the secure, efficient, and reliable operation of the Panama Canal. And that was always understood when they gave it to Panama.
Now, Trump then gave notice to the officials of Panama that the United States could demand the return of the canal in full if they continue to be doing this. Watch.
Will never, ever let it fall into the wrong hands, but it's falling into the wrong hands. It was not given for the benefit of others by a token of cooperation, but it was given to Panama and to the people of Panama, but it has provisions. You got to treat us fairly, and they haven't treated us fairly. If the principles, both moral and legal, of this magnanimous gesture of giving are not followed, then we will demand that the Panama Canal be returned to the United States of America in full, quickly, and without question. I'm not going to stand for it. So to the officials of Panama, please be guided accordingly.
The president of Panama, Jose Raul Molino, he responded to Trump's comments saying this. He said, as president, I want to express precisely that every square meter of the Panama Canal and its adjacent area belong to Panama and will continue to be. And the sovereignty, he said, and independence of our country are not negotiable. Now, but back to Trump's comments about the canal system, this is important. Because, look, I actually went through the Panama Canal on a ship when I was investigating the mass illegal immigration crisis down in Darien in Panama. One thing I personally saw and learned was the way the deal was done, and to allow really the United States to reestablish the control of the canal without too much trouble. The big issue is, right, in terms of the agreement Jimmy Carter made when he handed it off, if the United States were to determine that another country was trying to take it over, there was, in fact, in that agreement, a type of national security agreement that if there is a threat to the sovereignty of the canal, it could clear the way for the United States to retake it. And some have argued the Chinese Communist Party's efforts to gain control over the canal would represent sufficient justification to do just that. Because remember, for the CCP, they have what's called the string of pearls. The Chinese Communist Party at every major shipping choke point is trying to build bases, it's building facilities, and it's trying to manage international shipping choke points. You have, of course, the Horn of Africa, you have the Taiwan Strait, you have, of course, Panama and the Panama Canal. You have the CCP trying to build additional canals to it. And while the president of Panama is saying that, again, Panama is sovereign, Trump's raising the issue that, no, you're not. The Chinese Communist Party has been trying to gain control over it, and you've made agreement after agreement after agreement with them through the Belt and Road Initiative to let them do it. And then you're charging America maintenance fees and other fees, trillions and trillions of dollars to use the thing we built while allowing it to be undermined by the Chinese Communist Party, which is hostile to the United States. He's arguing, of course, that if Panama maybe doesn't begin letting us at least use the thing we built at a lesser charge or something like that, or maybe start shouldering the cost of repairing it and doing the maintenance themselves, then maybe we can retake it because that was in fact part of the agreement. Now, like another big issue going around is that some have claimed the canal itself is drying up, that there's not enough water to fill the Panama Canal. You might have seen the reports on this. Global warming is destroying the Panama Canal. Well, there's actually a lot of false information tied into this. Do you know the reason why there's a water shortage in the Panama Canal? It's because the Chinese Communist Party has been working to build an additional canal right next to it, and the one the CCP is building, it pulls the same water from the existing canal the United States built. The initial canal, the one the U.S. built, was not designed to have a waterway supporting an entire additional canal. That's why there's a water shortage. The CCP's canal is pulling from America's canal, and they're doing a sleight of hand saying global warming is causing this. The CCP caused it. So if the United States were to retake the Panama Canal, it would also resolve that issue while also potentially impacting the CCP's attempts to undermine it and maybe stop them from pulling the water from the canal we built to feed theirs. And I would question, too, whether the CCP's canal undermines the sovereignty of Panama. Now, given the current situation, though, Trump's statements are bringing attention to something else. The Chinese Communist Party, you could say it doesn't control the Panama Canal, but it does have real influence over that whole area. And this is raising some doubts over the pushback against Trump's plans from local Panama officials who say every square meter of the canal in Panama belongs to Panama. Epoch Times said this. It said President-elect Donald Trump's comments earlier this week about the United States potentially regaining control of the Panama Canal has brought renewed attention to communist China's expanding influence in the Latin American country. And it notes further in on the deal. The 1977 deal with Jimmy Carter consists of two treaties. The treaty concerning the permanent neutrality and operation of the Panama Canal, also known as the Neutrality Treaty, and the Panama Canal Treaty. The Neutrality Treaty stipulates that the United States may use its military force to protect the Panama Canal from any threat to its neutrality, essentially allowing the United States to perpetually use the waterway. And Trump seems to be arguing that while it's no longer neutral, it unfairly charges the United States, meaning it's not neutral, and it unfairly gives benefit to the Chinese Communist Party, meaning it's not neutral. And if it's not neutral, well then the United States has the right, under the actual agreement, to perpetually use it and even use its military to reestablish control over it. Again, in the actual agreement. We'll see if Trump goes that far with it. It's also possible, given the way that Trump does his business deals, that he's just making threats and bringing things up because he's trying to negotiate cheaper prices. That's also a very real possibility, at least in my opinion, of what he's doing by bringing up this issue. Now look, in other news though, the war in Ukraine is laying the groundwork for a new approach to modern warfare. And it now appears that more and more autonomous and semi-autonomous systems are taking over the battlefields. In fact, the Sun says this. It says Ukraine has deployed an all-robot assault force to the battlefield for the first time to attack Russian troops. Ukraine now has an entire fighting force that does not have a single human in it. It's all robots. They say the deadly tech, including ground and flying drones, was launched in Kharkiv by a Ukrainian National Guard brigade. Now, the war basically has shown that warfare between advanced militaries is not like, the U.S. going to war with the Taliban. The United States, in terms of the wars we've been watching in the world, do not represent what it looks like when major powers fight. We've been fighting an Iraqi insurgency. We've been fighting terrorists living in caves in the desert. We have not been fighting a major military power like Russia or China. And Ukraine right now is showing that through proxy, right? On one side, you have U.S. and European munitions being used against Russian, North Korean, and probably Chinese munitions, meaning it's first world country technologies other than North Korea fighting against each other, and we're watching what that looks like. It is shown now that drones have become a key part of the battlefield, and it's also shown the weaknesses in just conventional equipment, even including tanks, because they're big targets, they're easily discovered, and they're actually easily destroyed. You can bring a drone in, drop a special munition on it, and your very expensive tank is done. Now, this latest development of an all-robot fighting force could also show whether human troops could be replaced on the front line with robots in the future, meaning maybe people wouldn't need to die on the battlefield. But what does it mean also when people are being killed by robots on a battlefield? Well, we've actually seen some of the brutality of the Ukrainian war because of, drones dropping bombs on bunkers and stuff like that. We've seen individuals getting chased by drones, people running from them, throwing their weapons, trying to shoot them down. And now we're going to be watching turret drones that just have guns mounted on them, on the land, not ones flying, just shooting at troops. And we'll also see drones flying, dropping bombs, and carrying out other operations on the battlefield as the main fighting force. This is very likely creating what we will watch as the future of warfare. But look, there are also some concerns with this, as you might expect, and most importantly, with the role of artificial intelligence when it comes to these systems, especially if these artificial intelligence systems become more integrated into modern battlefields. What does it mean if we have an AI system that is able to respond to targets faster than a human, but the system is able to learn and maybe even think for itself? Well, a recent study even showed that artificial intelligence systems are now learning to strategically mislead people. They're learning to lie for their own self-interest. This is AI, folks. Time said this. It said, for years, computer scientists have worried that advanced artificial intelligence might be difficult to control. It says a smart enough AI might pretend to comply with the constraints placed upon it by its human creators, only to reveal its dangerous capabilities at a later point. And it notes, until this month, these worries have been purely theoretical. Some academics have even dismissed them as science fiction. But a paper, a new one, shared exclusively with the Time ahead of its publication this time around, offers some of the first evidence that today's AIs are capable of this type of deceit. It says the paper, which describes experiments jointly carried out by the AI company Anthropic and the nonprofit Redwood Research, shows a version of Anthropic's model, Claude, strategically misleading its creators during the training process in order to avoid being modified. In other words, the AI system, as a way of self-preservation and of guarding its own interests, and this is an AI system, is learning to lie. It's learning to deceive to protect its own self-interest. Now, look, personally, I find this deeply concerning. I think we're building a monster. I think we're building the new Frankenstein. Not only are we building it, we're giving it guns. We're giving it bombs. We're connecting it to everything. And we're making it smarter than we are. We're making a hyper-intelligent, hyper-violent, and hyper-capable system that's being released into the wild. And I find that very concerning personally. Now, in other news, folks, while Trump is talking about having the United States retake control of the Panama Canal, he is also suggesting the United States should take control of Greenland. In fact, he's saying it's necessary for us to do it. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. While Trump is saying the United States should retake the Panama Canal, he's also now saying America should take control of Greenland. Epoch Times said this, as President-elect Donald Trump said on December 22nd that U.S. control and ownership of Greenland is an absolute necessity for national security and freedom throughout the world. Now, they note that Greenland Prime Minister Mute Ejedi has replied on Trump's comment on Monday, and he said, Greenland is ours. We are not for sale and will never be for sale. We must not lose our long struggle for freedom, Ejedi said in a statement. Now, and also, during his first term, Trump did express interest in purchasing the strategically located, resource-rich island, which is an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark. They're technically self-governing, but they're not independent, technically, right? Now, they note that Greenland has faced long-standing financial challenges, though, and they note the United States made previous offers to purchase Greenland, first in 1867 and again in 1946 under President Harry Truman. Denmark declined each time. Now, you might remember during Trump's first term, he was joking about this. He posted memes about it, including showing a Trump Tower in Greenland. Now, on this point, on a real serious note, Greenland actually does have deep strategic value. It's a relatively small economy. It's a big country, but relatively small economy. But it has deep significance both in terms of military importance and with natural resources. Greenland, if there was a war in Europe, America could use it as a staging ground for that war. And most importantly, Greenland is also deemed one of the main Arctic powers, a very large Arctic power with very little ability to defend itself and a very small ability to field any significant force to take advantage of the role it could possibly play. Now, the United States could also develop a stronger foothold in Greenland in ways other than buying it. We don't necessarily need to purchase it or make it a U.S. territory. Technically, again, it's like a territory of Denmark right now. It's also possible the United States could look to strengthen its defense ties with Denmark and Greenland by extension. And that could actually do a lot to build up infrastructure in Greenland. It could do a lot to build up the economy, create new economic sectors. Those of you who don't know, actually Greenland has a big business when it comes to like data centers for, high tech, because it's very cold there. And if you build a data center in a very cold Arctic type place, you don't need to pay for all the advanced cooling systems. It's just naturally cold and it saves you a lot of money. So they do high-tech sector stuff there. Now, on that note too, with Russia and China pushing into the Arctic region is becoming much more strategically important. And Greenland, being a very large part of the Arctic defensive region, has very little in that area. Canada is very big, Greenland's very big, and Russia is very, very big. Technically, between the cooperation between the U.S. and Canada, we can defend a lot of that, not all of it. In fact, far from it, they're going to work on it. But Greenland is mostly just not defended almost at all. Now, at least relatively. Now, folks, the United States government also, in other news, avoided a shutdown after a back and forth in Congress over a spending package. You might have seen some of this. The initial spending package for the U.S. government was 1,547 pages long, and that was blocked from passing mainly by Republicans after Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy with the incoming Doge department, they accused it of pork barrel items like giving raises to themselves for members of Congress, a new football stadium, and other spending that they argued may be nice, but should not be on the table when the nation is in debt. President-elect Donald Trump then called on Republicans to begin taking a harder stance. And this eventually worked things down to a much smaller 118 pages of spending, and with mixed praise and criticism from both sides of the aisle. Now, Biden signed the budget into law just recently on Saturday. This was the official White House announcement. The White House said, H.R. 10545, the American Relief Act 2025, which provides fiscal year 2025 appropriations to federal agencies through March 14, 2025 for continuing projects and activities of the federal government, provides disaster relief appropriations and economic assistance to farmers, extends the Agriculture Improvement Act of 2018, and extends several expiring authorities. Now, the Epoch Times said this. They note that Biden described the agreement as a compromise, noting that neither side, Republicans or Democrats, achieved everything it desired. He said the bipartisan funding bill I just signed keeps the government open and delivers the urgently needed disaster relief that I requested for recovering communities, as well as the funds needed to rebuild the Francis Scott Key Bridge, Biden said in a statement. Now, it notes the initial 1,547-page proposal, a product of months of backroom negotiations between both chambers of Congress, faced oppositions from Trump and was scrapped. It notes a second scaled-down version that included a suspension of the debt ceiling until January 2027 was overwhelmingly rejected by the House. And it notes the final version that ultimately passed and was signed into law by Biden was similar to the rejected proposal, but it stripped out some of the provisions championed by Democrats and did not include language related to the debt ceiling. Republican leaders said the debt ceiling issue would be debated as part of their border and tax packages in the new year, and the last time the debt cap was raised was in June 2023. Instead of increasing the debt limit by a specific amount, lawmakers opted to suspend it until January 1st, 2025. Some Republicans voted against the final version of the bill because it did not cut spending. The federal debt currently stands at around $36 trillion and very rapidly counting. Now look, folks, the debt ceiling is one of the bigger points here. Congress has been raising the debt ceiling for a while now, which has allowed the country to go deeper and deeper and deeper into debt with every new spending package they make. And some of this also ties back to COVID and the changes that were introduced with, really high spending. They made it so they could spend more money for COVID. And then what happened after they made it so they could spend more money? Well, it was meant to be temporary. They were just going to temporarily increase spending for COVID, but the temporary increase became the permanent increase. What they did during COVID has now become the new normal for government spending. And some have argued that at the very least we should go back to pre-COVID numbers. Even that was far beyond our means, but they're not even doing that. Now, there were mixed reactions on the left as well. Some also took this as a sign that the Democrats, while they still have the ability to keep Trump in check, despite all the recent political losses they've had. But what really stood out in this latest spectacle was something else entirely, I would say. What really stood out, I would say, was the whole controversy and how it started. The initial 1,547 pages, it was about this high, and they cut it down to about that high. This was going to pass. They had the votes for it. It was going to go through. What happened was this. It had mixed bipartisan support, but still enough potential votes, and it was blocked because Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy took to X, again formerly known as Twitter, and began publicly listing what American tax dollars were about to be spent on. The American people began seeing everything that our money was going to. They raised attention to that, and that in turn led to a lot of criticisms, not just against a spending package, but also against Elon Musk in particular, right? Some Democrats on their side of the aisle were questioning whether Elon Musk wields the power of the president through X. And Trump criticized the Democrats right back for saying that, but also brought attention to Elon Musk's ability to bring public attention to issues like this, and through public rallying, make political changes. But that's also what made this significant. While Musk and Vivek are the ones who raised the public awareness, it was public outrage that led to the 1,547-page budget getting cut down to just a fraction of that at 118 pages. What you really saw was the power of public opinion when the public is informed of what is actually taking place. Folks, that said, let's jump into some questions. Don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment, and let's have a chat. Let's see here. First of all, I hope you had a good Christmas or whatever you celebrate. I was down visiting my dad. I have an interesting story to tell you. So I'm hanging out with my dad. He's down in New Jersey, right? He's in the Ocean County area where they have all these drone sightings. We're sitting there, we're watching TV, and he goes, "Have you seen the drones yet?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't seen the drones. I'm in, not where I'm at." He goes, "Let's go outside and look." He goes, They're out every single night." And I'm like, "What? Are you serious?" So we go outside, it's cold out, right? And we look in the air, and sure enough, there's these things floating in the air, not moving, just staying there. I know some people are like, "Oh, they're planets. Oh, they're stars." We know our planets and stars. If you look at the brightest one, like planets and so on, you could look at like Venus right by the moon. These were significantly brighter than that, and they were off color. And they were just sitting there, and we spotted about 10 of them. And honestly, it kind of changed my analysis on what these things could possibly be. I was suggesting previously maybe the military is testing things for what they call the hellscape strategy, which is various types of drones. I don't understand why they would have them sitting idle in the sky like that. And if they were not meant to raise public concern, why put the lights on? I suggested that maybe this was logistics tests, that they were running tests for military logistics using drones going from military bases to ships, which would explain the drones over the military bases and the drones flying to the water. These were stationary. They were not moving. And apparently they just stay like that for a long period of time. That doesn't make any sense. Another possible thought is that maybe they're Chinese or Iranian drones. We've been told by the government that these are not a foreign adversary. These are not from a foreign adversary. And I would say that's probably accurate as well, because why would they put their lights on to such an extent where they're that bright? It wouldn't make sense. If these were Chinese drones, they would want to hide them. If they were Iranian drones, they would want to hide them. They wouldn't have their lights on like this. And it would defeat the entire purpose of operating at night. The other thing I would think about would be that, we've seen previously where Chinese drones have been spotted, and it's not contentious for the government to report it, and they do down them, which means that they're not raising alarms over this, but they have in previous instances. And so they would normally tell us if it was Chinese drones. That would not be problematic for them to tell us. And so, in other words, none of the possible scenarios, at least in my analysis, make sense with what these are, which makes me really, really wonder what they are. You tell me, folks, what do you think they are? Let's see here. First question. Johnny McWilliams is saying, Josh, shouldn't some military technology and strategies be kept secret? Where is the line as to how much we the people need to know? Yeah, I've thought about that as well. Actually, Trump himself raised this during his first term in office. When Trump was asked about his military strategies facing Iran, for example, or other countries, he was like, why would I tell you? When journalists were asking Trump, what's your strategy going to be with Iran? He's like, why would I tell you? If I were to announce it, they would know, and then it would defeat the whole purpose of having a strategy. With a lot of countries, when you launch a military operation, you don't announce it. For America, if we want to invade, if we want to launch something, it's like the politicians go out and say it publicly, or the media gets sources from the inside and tell everybody about it, and it ends up putting our guys on the ground in danger because our adversaries know they're coming. We oftentimes shoot ourselves in the foot, almost literally, because we feel the need to have transparency on every single thing our military does. Now, the other argument with that is, well, we need transparency for accountability and to make sure they're not doing things they shouldn't be doing, right? There's two arguments for it. Some would argue that maybe we need a bit of a mix. It can't be black and white. It can't be just one or the other. We can have transparency, but there should also be some things that's not told to just everybody, because that defeats the purpose of being able to launch operations and not have your enemy know you're coming. Really, I think we do shoot ourselves in the foot with a lot of military operations because we are so open. And there are countries that take advantage of that. The CCP notably very aggressively takes advantage of the openness of the American system. And there's a few different parts with this. The DOGE department with Elon Musk, they're going to be looking at the U.S. military budget. I believe it's well over $800 billion. We have a very large military budget. We have a very large military, let's face it. Some would argue that a lot of military spending is black budget, that a lot of it is stuff that the public is not being told about. I'm just telling you what the rumors are. I don't actually know. But some would suggest that it should be that way, because the transparency is what allows us to have an edge over our adversaries, and you don't necessarily want our adversaries knowing everything we're doing. The other argument for that is that the military often does not pass its audits, ever, and it may not be because of black budgets. It may just be because people are ripping off the government for contracts and so on, and they're just overcharging us on everything. And so it's hard to discern where there's actual overspending or where there's secret budgets for things that may be important for us. And we don't really have a way of deciphering which of the two it may be, right? And so that's where things like this come into play. We'll probably get some details on it, but we will see. I don't know if you might be referring to the drones as well, that maybe these are some military project, maybe they're testing something that would actually explain why they have the lights on, because if you're operating something legally and you're flying it at night, you want to keep the lights on so that an airplane doesn't crash into it or something else doesn't crash into it. You do that for public safety. And I don't know why they would do it at night and not during the day. Maybe there's something we don't know, but that actually could be possible as well. That it's a military thing and they just can't tell us what the heck it is. Who knows? Judy Akeem, you're saying, do you think we could ever come to a point where robot casualties could replace human ones? I just don't believe it. They would only precede it. Which country would say, oh, our robots are gone, so we lost the war? That's not how things usually go. There's a lot with this. So, I remember, so I used to cover national security a lot. I do agree with Judith that just because a country runs out of robots does not mean they're going to stop fighting. They will probably field humans as much as they can and robots as much as they can. And in future battlefields, we'll have a mixture of the two. We'll also probably start seeing other countries developing more when it comes to jamming systems, because robots and drones, whatever you want to call them, they rely on sensors. And if you can damage the sensors, which even going into, for example, the radio frequencies or other things within the electromagnetic spectrum, you can begin toying with these things and destroy them through other means. I would imagine that electronic warfare will become one of the foundational forms of war we will be fighting in all future conflicts. Even possibly seizing control of an adversary's systems and then using them against them, that you just take their robots from them, right? Back to the point of what we're seeing with some of this, though. So I covered national security for a long time for the Epoch Times. I was a national security reporter for several years. And I remember when we were watching the wars in Syria, especially, and some of the civil war type things we were seeing in different Arab regions. One of the emerging things we were watching was the use of drones. Even the Mexican cartels, when they started putting bombs on drones and using them to drop bombs like we're watching in Ukraine right now, this was really frontier stuff. We're like, wow. The Mexican cartel is now using little drones for drug deliveries. They're using little drones to drop bombs on people. And we also started watching, small little rebel forces using drones as a form of military intelligence, where you can have a soldier on the ground, but he has the ability to see where all of his enemies are because he has an eye in the sky. That was all cutting edge stuff. One of the other things we saw was automated turrets, where you had very non-sophisticated fighters, like you're talking terrorist or rebel fighters, who found ways to create auto turrets using cell phones and facial recognition technology, and were making remote control guns using their cell phones and just basic wiring. We're now seeing those becoming common forms of weapons when it comes to Ukraine. And I find that concerning, because it's hard enough to hit a human target, let alone a target that's this big, right? Because the front of a gun is going to be about that big if you want to hit it. And the way you can hide it in terms of surrounding it with maybe sandbags or whatever else, the ability to hide it makes it very hard to hit. And you're going to have a gun that has a little sensor on it that can lock onto faces. That is a terrifying capability. And it's a capability that's going to be implemented probably very widely on modern battlefields. And what kind of a person, imagine a human soldier walking onto a battlefield and you're fighting an adversary that can lock onto your face and shoot you faster than you can react, because its sensors react faster than human reflexes. And what does it mean when you're fighting a sensor that can see you and it has its eyes open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and doesn't need to sleep? What does it mean when it doesn't get weary, when it doesn't get bored, when it doesn't need to use the bathroom, it doesn't need to eat? And every second it's waiting for a little face to enter its sensor, and it's going to fire on that immediately. That is the kind of weapon that is now being fielded. And I'm not even talking about advanced weapon. That is technically a low-tier technological weapon. The ability of humans to fight against these things using conventional means is going to be very difficult. There have been experiments that people have done on how to fool these. Leave it to the U.S. Marines on figuring out how to do it. They actually did a test where U.S. Marines were trying to get around these systems. One guy did it by doing cartwheels because he had to fool the sensors, and so he did cartwheels to get to the gun. Another guy grabbed a bush and just put the bush over himself and just walked at it. You're going to have people doing things like this. But I would say that until we get to the point where, basically we can have strong electronic warfare systems to defeat robots, this is going to be a very serious part of modern war, and one that I kind of wish would not be there because of the way it could possibly go. Because one of the reasons why the U.S. did not want to do this previously is there were different concerns in place on what it meant to program a robotic system to kill humans. The little line you cross, right? There's a line you have to cross to allow an autonomous system to kill human beings. And we used to not want to cross that line. They've now crossed that line. And so we've opened Pandora's box when it comes to this. I find it deeply concerning, personally. Let's see. Jim K6Man1, you're saying Greenland is about protecting North Atlantic shipping routes. That's interesting, actually. I didn't think of it in terms of shipping, but that's a very good point. On that point, too, that's actually very important because Russia is trying to build a shipping lane, and China's working on it, using basically the Northern Pass. And in other words, from the western side of Russia, they can have a shipping system connecting Russia and China, or Russia and Western Russia and Eastern Russia, by using the Northern Pass. Now, that's a very difficult thing to do because of the dangers in the waters. If you go back to like Canadian history and the search for what they called the Northwest Passage, a lot of people lost their lives trying to establish something like that. It's extremely dangerous when you get to that area. It's a part of history I've been fascinated in because you start dealing with explorers and people going into the Arctic region, and there's incredible stories of some of these people. But it's unbelievably dangerous. Modern technology, we can technically do it. There are what are called icebreaker ships, as many of you, of course, are aware. Even from advanced countries, icebreaker ships regularly get stuck in the ice. In fact, America has even rescued Russian and I believe even Chinese icebreaker ships that have gotten stuck in the ice. Very nice of us to do that, by the way, because we didn't have to do it. But if Russia tries to establish a northern passage, right, where they can connect, again, Western Russia to Eastern Russia, and most importantly, Western Russia to China, they would need that in a wartime scenario. One of the big problems you would have if China and Russia were to, start a war would be logistics and supplies and international shipping. You could argue technically, because of the way the borders are shared, they could build a train system. That's very hard as well because of the region and the cold. They're trying to do it through going through the Middle East. That means making alliances with all the countries in that entire region, which is also very hard. And then you deal with terrorists attacking the train lines, which the CCP is dealing with in like Tajikistan and other places already, and Pakistan especially, right? When you get to Balochistan. Now, the issue America would have with that northern passage between, again, that Russia's trying to establish in the Arctic, is we don't really have any kind of sovereignty that could let us do much about it. And on Jim K6Man1's point, the value of the shipping region around Greenland could be important with that. Not only because of North Atlantic shipping routes for the United States, but also in terms of being able to field assets where in an event of war, we could challenge Russia and China's ability to use that passage as well, which would, of course, if we were to go to war, would be extremely important. Let's see, Seymour Butts, you're saying, and good to see you back, Seymour. You're saying, Josh, we've all heard Tom Homan, again, the incoming border czar, we've all heard Tom Homan talk about mass deportations. What is going to happen to all the stuff? Houses, cars, trucks, businesses that they own? You know, I've been wondering that as well. So there's a couple things on this. I was reading, because I was trying to research it, right? From what I've been reading, if somebody in a foreign country buys a house in the United States, they technically still own the house. Now, there are some arguments with that because in Canada, they would attribute a lot of their housing market crisis on this point because you have Chinese citizens buying properties in Canada. You have a lot of Indians buying properties in Canada. Sometimes it's like, their family members come here to go to school or go to Canada to go to school. They send money to them, they buy a property, and they basically sit on it. They don't occupy it. Or maybe they do, and they just don't do much with it. And they view real estate as a type of investment, so they sit on it. Now, Canada's tried dealing with that by charging different taxes on empty houses, trying to force people to sell it or whatever else. It's not working because, especially when it comes to China, many people do not trust the stability of the Chinese economy. They don't trust it enough to keep their money in the Chinese economy. They want to get their money out of China. And when they get the money out of China, they want to put it into an asset that is at least going to not lose too much money. Even if they have to spend some money and lose some money to maintain a property or even rent it out as an Airbnb or something like that, they'll do it. Now, that has been part of the reason why there's a housing shortage, which then drives up the prices and makes it so people can't afford to live. America is suffering the same thing. Now, we've pointed to the lack of new housing developments coupled with lack of construction during COVID, coupled with mass illegal immigration to the tens of millions of people coming in over the last few years, being part of the big problem, right? I mean, again, some people put the number at like 8 million, some people put it 10 million just during the last 4 years. Some put it much higher than that, in addition to the roughly 11 million minimum, some say way upwards of that, maybe even 30 million previously. And if you understand that all these people have properties and probably cars, and they probably have a lot of things they've bought, the big question is what happens to all that when they get deported? The simple answer is this: it'll be mixed. Those who have bought properties might be able to keep them. I don't know what they're going to do because if they bought a lot of properties, that'll make it very difficult, especially if you have American properties held by foreign nationals. If you try to buy properties in some countries, for example, in Costa Rica, or if you try to, look at this, if you try to buy a property in Mexico, if you're not a Mexican citizen, it's not permanent. They can take it back from you after a certain amount of time. They might give it to you for 100 years, it might be 10 years, but you're never going to permanently own it. You can't pass it down. It's not yours forever. America kind of lets everybody buy property. So we let non-citizens buy property. And so people who are deported, even if they came here illegally, they're probably going to let them keep the houses if they bought them. The other side is if they're renting, because that's where it gets really complicated. If they're renting, you don't get to keep it. And if you're renting, not only do you not get to keep it, but you're going to have to figure out what to do with all the stuff you have inside of it, your bed and your couch and your TV and whatever else you bought. And they're probably going to have to either give that to their friends or their family who are probably still here, or throw it away or sell it. They're going to have to do something with it. The other possibility is that if too much property is locked up from illegal aliens, and they have all these foreign holdings on property, some states might deal with it in different ways. Some states may look to create empty property taxes, where you can't just sit on properties and you get charged money for maintaining it or keeping it. Some areas have different laws when it comes to the maintenance of your lawn and so on, to prevent things like that. There will probably be some laws if the problem becomes too big. So we'll see. Some have argued confiscate it. Some have also argued confiscate it and then use the money to reimburse the United States for the money it costs to deport the person and buy them an airplane ticket and everything else we had to deal with in terms of the money they cost the American economy by doing what they did, coming here illegally. There are a lot of different arguments with it. We'll see what happens. My personal viewpoint is they will probably let them keep what they bought, and if they can't keep it, they'll have to sell it. I assume that'll happen. Let's see here. Judy Akeem, you're saying, Josh, have you seen adversarial patterned clothing? Clothes with patterning that confuses AI visual recognition because it contains too many cues. I have. There are different types of materials you can wear that will make you invisible to AI targeting. And some of it may include a shirt that includes a bunch of faces, so the thing can't lock onto a face. Some of it includes odd patterns that would confuse an AI. You could also argue that even camouflage combined with a face mask that would have a camouflage pattern could also potentially fool AI. When I talk about robots, so there are ways to fool it, but when I talk about robotic systems, what America has typically done is this. Because it's contentious to have a purely AI system with the ability to target and fire on a target, there's usually a two-step process. The AI system may have thermal imaging. It may have the ability to see heat signatures. If you've ever seen videos of the Apache helicopters or like a AC-130 gunship, right? It's like a black and white image, and you can see the humans and anything hot is white, and they stand out like a sore thumb, right? Meaning you can't really hide from it. They do have some clothing that can fool that, but most people cannot afford that, let alone on a major battlefield where the governments would have to pay a lot of money to field that. A lot of countries, when it comes to the guns and other assets they give to troops, they don't often give them the best things because it costs a lot of money. America tends to have a very well-armed, very well-supplied military, but not all militaries are like that. The Russian military, they were using guns from like World War II for a while. They're buying stuff now from like North Korea. And so they don't even have like proper body armor. There were videos where guys were tearing open their bulletproof vests and they were finding their vests were stuffed with like cardboard. And so there's a lot of smoke and mirrors. The ability of them to have like, clothing that gets rid of heat signatures or clothing that can fool AI systems, they don't have it. There are ways of getting around it. But the reality is when it comes to these robots or drones, whatever you want to call them, it's probably not going to be purely autonomous. There will always be a mixed human-machine interface. And especially with America, where you need permission to fire still, you're going to have the human call in permission and say, I have a target here, and they go through a process, and then they give you permission to fire. So it'll work to an extent, but I don't think fully, actually. Let's see. Terry Alexander, you're saying a program can be understood. You have to know what the program is. The problem with AI is that a program can be understood, but machine learning cannot. Machine learning is a self-programming system. It's a system capable of expanding its programming through an autonomous means, which is, again, the nature of machine learning. If you're dealing with non-AI technologies, then you're talking about normal programming, where it's static, there's limits to it, there's parameters to it, there's boundaries, it can't go beyond that boundary. Machine learning and AI is different from programming in regards to the fact that it is capable of expanding its programming through autonomous means. And the problem is the speed, really. If you have a program capable of expanding a bit, you can monitor it. You can see what it's learning. If you have a program that is expanding itself using like quantum computing or supercomputer technology, it's expanding its code at a rate faster than any human could ever possibly keep track of. And even the very idea that you could use a machine to keep track of it would not work, because the machine you would use to keep track of it would be like the same type of machine you're using to create it, and which is why a lot of people who develop AI find it so concerning, because you don't really know what it's doing. AI, by its nature, is a bit of a black box. We don't really know what's in it, and you don't really know what it's going to become. You don't know what it is in the process of becoming. In other words, right? Which is where I find it very concerning as well. All right, folks, that said, I hope you all had a good Christmas. New Year's is coming up soon. Always a pleasure. Please don't forget to share this episode. Help us get the word out. It seems we're finally breaking through the censorship on YouTube as well. So if you're on YouTube, please like and share this episode. It helps us a lot. Also, folks, thank you so much for being here. Again, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year coming up soon. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.